Here we will see presentation layer in clean architecture. The presentation layer is the outermost layer of a clean architecture which is responsible for interacting with users or external clients, and it handles incoming requests and outgoing responses. It accepts external requests and return response. It doesn't contain any business logic. Instead, it acts as a thin wrapper that maps incoming user inputs to appropriate commands or queries, which are defined in application layer. Presentation layer contains web APIs, MVC controllers, Razor Pages, Blazor UI, and front-end interaction logic. Different responsibilities of presentation layers are exposing endpoints. It defines RESTful API routes, GraphQL endpoints, or MVC Blazor views via controllers or minimal APIs. Then translating requests. It receives incoming raw HTTP payloads and convert them into strongly typed application commands or queries using design patterns like CQRS with mediator. Then request and response mapping. It uses mapping utilities to translate between client-side data transfer object and internal use case contract. Then basic syntactic validation. It ensures incoming request data formats are structurally well formed before passing data deeper into the application. Then composition root and dependency injection. It utilizes the program.cs file to bootstrap the entire solution, register services, and wire up abstract interfaces to their concrete implementations. Then global exceptions and middleware handling. It intercepts application errors using features like iException Handler interface to safely format standard secure error schemas for the client. Then application setting management. It hosts configuration parameters such as connection strings and JWT token keys inside appsetting.json and cross-cutting concerns. It manages UI-centric components like Swagger or OpenAPI documentation, API versioning, CORS policies, and request logging. Structural building blocks of presentation layers are controllers, which serve as a thin entry point that receives HTTP requests and return HTTP responses. Its core responsibility is to translate external web data into data formats that are understood by the inner application core. Then endpoints. It acts as the entry point to your application. Their primary responsibility is to accept HTTP requests, validate the transport models, delegate the execution to the application layer, and return appropriate HTTP response status codes and payloads. Then middleware. It interacts directly with the HTTP request response pipeline and depends on web-specific frameworks like Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.HTTP. Middleware is the outermost layer which ensures that inner layers remain completely decoupled from web or framework concerns. Then filters. Different filters like core action filter, exception filter, and resource filters belongs to the presentation layer. They depend directly on the Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.MVC framework. So placing them in inner layer would break the dependency rule by decoupling your business logic to a specific web framework. Then view models. They serve as a public-facing data contract tailored specifically for the user interface, which prevents inner business logic from being tightly coupled to your requirements. Then requests. Requests represent the entry point of data into the system, which is originated from the external client, such as mobile app, single page application, or third-party service. Then response. Response serves as the outer translation bridge between the internal application results and the external clients. Its job is to capture pure data or errors that are written by the application layer and format them into appropriate HTTP status code and payloads without exposing inner business entities. Then authentication. At presentation layer, HTTP requests are intercepted, credentials are passed, and the user's identity is officially established. So with the user validation or token generation, the presentation layer acts as a primary gatekeeper for incoming client traffic. Then authorization. The presentation layer ensures only authorized users can access the resources. However, to preserve the independence of core application, the presentation layer should only enforce permissions, while the definitions, models, and complex business authorization rules must reside in the deeper application or domain layers. And API configuration. presentation. The Web API project acts as the presentation layer, which serves as the system's entry point by translating incoming HTTP requests into internal application commands or queries. Benefits of presentation layers are multi-platform support. You can attach different front ends to the exact same backend business logic without rewriting core application feature. Targeted UI testing. It allows user to test user interface behavior, rendering and the state management in isolation, which makes UI test faster and more reliable since they don't hit databases or complex business rules directly. Separation of concerns. UI specific tasks such as HTTP request response handling, data formatting and routing are contained here. The core application logic remains completely unaware how its data is being displayed and requested. Thin controllers. It moves all business logic out of the UI entry points. The controller's job is to receive request, translate it into query or command and forward it to the application layer and format the output. Easier testing. It enforces a strict separation between UI execution and the presentation logic, so the controllers can be tested independently. Then better maintainability. It decouples user interface code from core business logic, which keeps components highly focused and offload the complex operations to use cases and better for maintainability. And drawbacks of presentation layer. High bipolarity mapping. Since domain entities cannot reference infrastructure models, developers must map between domain models and database entities. This creates extra classes and increases maintenance overhead. Then over-engineering risk. In smaller applications, enforcing strict boundaries and adding interfaces for external services introduce unnecessary navigational complexity. Then indirectional debugging. Abstracting database queries and external APIs behind interfaces makes it harder to trace the exact execution path and debug issues. And pass-through layers. Strict adherence to layering rules can result in developers creating empty pass-through wrapper classes just to satisfy the architecture, which wastes time.